There is a very famous shroud in the world, clearly printed with a man with a beard, mustache and shoulder-length hair, parted in the middle, from 1.70 to 1.88 meters tall. From the shroud could be discerned countless gruesome wounds on this man's body, such as cuts, gouges, stab wounds, and whip marks. It is the Shroud of Turin, believed to be used to wrap the body and preserve the final image of Jesus, after he suffered and died on the cross. The strange thing is that this cloth reproduces exactly what the Bible records, and it has no human impact, cannot be reproduced, cannot be faked. How does a cloth represent the sacred relic so authentically, and last for thousands of years? You and dear friends. The Shroud of Turin is revered by millions of Christians, and is one of the most sacred religious symbols in the world. Pope John Paul II described it as a reflection of the gospel, and even a special relic. Even after thousands of years have passed, the blood-stained linen cloth and alleged image of Jesus Christ still exist, representing a sacred relic that is unique in the world. Is this really the cloth used to wrap Jesus? Did someone fake this cloth? A lot of scientific research has been conducted from chemistry, biology, medicine, forensics to analyze the optical image on this artifact and determine the tremor that the Shroud of Turin has structures that cannot be faked, even with the most modern technology of the 21st century. The great mystery of the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is rectangular, measuring about 4.4 by 1.1 meters, woven of flax, reddish-brown. According to records, this shroud was first mentioned in documents in the Middle Ages 1354. According to the Gospel of John, after Mary Magdalene ran to tell the news, the two apostles, Peter and John, ran to the tomb of Jesus. And they found that the body of the Lord was no longer there, but the cloth used to cover the body was still there. It was the apostle Peter who first collected the cloth and brought it home. The most mysterious thing about this cloth is the faint, brown figure of a naked man with his hands crossed over his body. Both sides of the shroud are aligned along the plane of the body and in opposite directions. The image of the head part shows a pale straw yellow circle that looks like a ring of thorns that Jesus was forced to wear on his head. According to experts, on this 1,000-year-old cloth is the shadow of a man with a beard, mustache, shoulder-length hair, parted in the middle. The detailed body image imprinted on the cloth shows the sufferings that the Lord endured with countless terrible wounds such as incisions, chisels, stab wounds, and whip marks. It was previously theorized that these stains and figures were painted on the linen by someone at some point in history. But in a report to the Academy, the famous French Dr. Delazzi said that the above images were formed by contact with a real human body. Not only that, modern science can prove that there are more mysteries behind the story of the Shroud of Turin. We invite you to take a look at these 6 amazing points below. There is no human impact. According to National Geographic, more than 117 years since the first negative image of the cloth was taken for research, many scientists have stepped in and caused endless controversy. In 1969, a group of 33 scientists led by the US was allowed to directly examine the cloth, to advise on preservation techniques and future testing. The second approach was for 5 consecutive days in 1978. The research team carried 7 tons of equipment, worked 24 hours a day, under the supervision of an association of European scientists. In the end, they concluded, there is no human impact on the marks on the fabric. The team's report published in 1981 said, the images on the linen are indeed of a man, crucified and tortured. The marks on the cloth are blood stains, containing traces of blood. Blood components such as hemoglobin, component of red blood cells, and albumin, component of plasma. To this day, scientists have not been able to give an exact answer to the true age of the Shroud of Turin. Many scientists believe that the cloth has been patched and restored after many events. Therefore, just one corner of the cloth is not enough to verify the accuracy of the date in which it appears. Can't reproduce. An iconic but unanswered question about this cloth: how is the image formed and preserved on linen after thousands of years? Scientists call it mystery of mysteries. For believers, this is a miracle. It was determined that the human image was not drawn on, but permeable into the linen cloth. Many attempts to reproduce this image, reproducing the unusual permeation of color onto the linen, have failed. The dye on the linen is very strange, only seeping down to a thin layer, smaller than 0.7 micrometers, equivalent to 1/30 the diameter of a fabric. Physicist Paolo Di Lazzaro and colleagues from the National Agency for Technology, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, ENEA, Italy, conducted experiments for 5 years, trying to reproduce the same images on the Shroud of Turin. In a study published in 2011, The team said that they used high-powered ultraviolet rays to shoot linen sheets, but can only reproduce approximately colors, and is similar to only a few square centimeters on linen, but cannot reproduce the entire physical and chemical properties of the image on linen. It is not possible to reproduce the whole image of Jesus after the crucifixion. According to Mr. Lazzaro, they used the most modern ultraviolet light of the 21st century. It requires pulsations of time shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second, and intensity on the order of several billion watts. The physicist posed the question, if even the most modern technology of the 21st century can't do it, how did people fake it in the Middle Ages? Can't fake it. Another steely proof of this shroud is that the blood structure and nanoparticles that exist on the cloth cannot be faked. An Italian research team found that Turin cloth contains nanoparticles that are rarely found in normal human blood. According to Mr. Elvio Carlino, researcher at the Institute of Crystallography in Bari, Italy, these very small nanoparticles reveal the pain of the victim wrapped in the shroud. These nanoparticles have a strange structure, size and distribution, said Professor Giulio Fondi of the University of Padua. And that bloodstains contain large amounts of creatinine and ferritin, which are commonly seen in patients with severe external injuries such as torture. The existence of biological nanoparticles found in the experiment indicates the violent death of the man wrapped in the Shroud of Turin, Professor Fondi said. The cloth contains DNA from around the world. Adding to the record of strange discoveries about this mysterious shroud, Italian researchers have discovered that this cloth may have been woven in India, and contains DNA from around the world. Through sequencing DNA from dust and pollen on the shroud, one can learn the origins of the human races and the environmental circumstances to which the shroud was exposed. DNA analysis shows that the cloth may have been made in India, and traveled around the world before reaching Italy in the Middle Ages. Blood stains of the same rare blood type AB. According to two botanists at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Avinom Danan and Yuri Baruch, analysis showed that flowers, pollen, and many other plant components left traces on the Shroud of Turin. Analytical results showed that the pollen contained in the shroud was from a herb that was only found in March and April in the Jerusalem region. Researchers believe that this may be the type of flower made into a ring of thorns attached to the head of Jesus. In particular, this pollen sample is said to match the pollen sample on the cloth kept at the Cathedral of Oviedo, Spain, which is said to be the cloth covering the face of Jesus when he was wrapped. Both of these cloths contain blood stains of the same rare blood type AB. Consistent with biblical records. In a report to the French Academy of Sciences in 1902, the famous Dr. Delazzi said that at that time, Jesus' face was beaten with fists, his nose was injured, his right eyelid was bleeding, the head was pierced by a sharp object, the whole body was covered with whip marks, the hands and feet were nailed through, and the ribs were stabbed with a huge wound. He was beaten before he died and was finally nailed to the cross. According to legend and the Bible, Jesus was tortured in Judea before being crucified. This shocked the believers when the Shroud of Turin told exactly the same story, recreating countless terrible wounds on the body of God. In the book The Mystery of the Shroud, Professor Giulio Fondi and journalist Saverio Gaeta examined the fibers from the shroud. The results showed that they appeared in the period 300 BC to 400 AD, coinciding with the time that Jesus lived recorded in the Bible. Sacred Relic is real. Experiencing countless events and many times disappeared without a trace in history because of natural disasters and wars, in 1502, the shroud was transferred to keep in the Church of Saint Chapelle in Chambéry. In the same year, a fire broke out, the cloth was saved, but there were still burnt marks. The nuns mended the cloth. The photographs of the Shroud of Turin remained unremarkable until it was examined in negative form, showing a man like the one described in the Bible. This is seen as strong evidence for the fact that Jesus was crucified described in the Bible. The Shroud of Turin is considered a holy relic which still retains traces of the tortures that God suffered, which are blood, crucifixion, thorns on his head, and cruel torture wounds. Some believers believe that this image was transferred from Jesus' body to the cloth by a divine light or energy when Jesus was resurrected, and imprinted the Lord's body on the shroud. In 1958, Pope Pius XII declared that the image on the shroud was the face of Jesus. Pope Francis and Pope Benedict XVI have both described the Shroud of Turin as a symbol of faith and relic. During its 2010 display, over 2 million people came to see the remarkable shroud. This includes Pope Benedict XVI. The image of the shroud was also televised on March 30, 2013. As for modern science, it remains one of history's greatest mysteries. In a world where scientific technology is advanced, There are artifacts and historical events that even modern science cannot create and recreate. Despite a lot of controversy between science and theology, the Shroud of Turin still stands as a sacred testimony to all Catholics. Above all, it also shows belief in God, in supernatural entities beyond the ability of human understanding and perception. The question of whether Jesus and his relics really existed, seems to have an answer. Do you believe that there is still a spiritual world that surpasses science and is many times more perfect? Thank you for watching the video. Now bye and see you in the next videos.